An arrangement at Rosewick Park. Chapter 1. The Proposal. Miss Georgiana Blythe had never been offered a glass of Madeira at 10:30 in the morning, and she took this as the first of many ominous signs. The library at Rosewick Park was a cavernous, chill place, its walls lined with leather-bound books that had not been opened in 50 years. A fire struggled in the grate, casting more shadow than warmth. Georgiana sat very straight in a wing-back chair, her gloved hands folded in her lap, while across from her, Viscount Hale poured 2 generous measures of wine with the casual ease of a man who had been drinking since breakfast. Sebastian Hale was, by any reasonable measure, a disaster. She had known this before accepting his summons. The entire county knew it. He was the eldest son of an earl, heir to a title and an estate that he was systematically dismantling through gambling, racing, and a profound disregard for arithmetic. He had the lean, wolfish handsomeness of a man who had never been told no, dark hair falling across his brow, grey eyes that gleamed with restless intelligence, a mouth that seemed permanently poised between a smirk and a sneer. But this morning, Georgiana noticed something else. Shadows beneath his eyes, a tremor in his hands as he passed her the glass. "You're wondering why I asked you here," he said. "I am wondering many things, my lord, chiefly whether you intend to seduce me or murder me, as neither seems particularly likely at this hour." A startled laugh escaped him. It transformed his face, made him look younger, less cynical. "Seduction wasn't on the agenda, though I confess I'm flattered you considered it. Murder would require more energy than I currently possess." Georgiana allowed herself a small smile. She was 24 years old, the eldest daughter of the vicar of St. Margaret's, and she had long ago learned that the only way to manage difficult men was to refuse to be impressed by them. "Then shall we dispense with the preamble, my lord? You did not invite the vicar's daughter to Rosewick Park for the scenery." Sebastian set down his glass. He leaned back in his chair and regarded her with an expression she could not quite read. Calculation, perhaps, mixed with something that looked almost like embarrassment. "I am in debt," he said. "Not the ordinary, manageable sort of debt. The sort that has men with large fists and small patience arriving at my door. The sort that has my father threatening to disinherit me. The sort that—" He stopped, ran a hand through his hair. "The sort that will land me in Marshalsea prison before the month is out." Georgiana said nothing. She waited. "I need money," he continued. "A significant amount, immediately, and I need respectability. I have 2 younger sisters, you see. Beatrice and Charlotte. They're 12 and 14, still at school in Bath. If I am imprisoned, or if my father carries out his threat to cut me off entirely, they become wards of my uncle, a man whose estate is run on principles of such draconian economy that he once sent back a pudding because it contained too many raisins." "The horror," Georgiana said dryly. Sebastian's lips twitched. "You mock me, but you have not tasted my aunt's cooking. It is a form of cruelty that should be outlawed by Parliament." He sobered. "I cannot allow them to be raised in that house. My mother would have hated it." There was something genuine in his voice then, a thread of real feeling beneath the rakish facade. Georgiana filed this away and took a careful sip of her Madeira. It was excellent, probably stolen from her father's cellar. "All of this brings us to the question of why you have summoned me, my lord," she said. "I am not a banker. I am not a bailiff. I am a vicar's daughter with no fortune, no connections, and no particular beauty to recommend me. If you need a wife for her dowry, there are at least a dozen young ladies in the county who would throw their bonnets at you." "Their fathers would not," Sebastian said. "I've already tried. Lord Bex threatened to call me out when I so much as glanced at his daughter. Sir Reginald Pemberton offered to have me removed from his property by force. The only fathers who would consider me at this point are those so desperate they would sell their own mothers, and their daughters are either 14 or missing several teeth. Charming. I am not seeking charm. I am seeking practicality." He leaned forward, and now his gaze was intent, focused entirely on her. Miss Blythe, I have made inquiries about you. You run your father's parish school. You have managed his household since your mother's death. You are known throughout the district as a woman of sense, economy, and unimpeachable character. You are not romantic. You do not play the pianoforte or paint watercolours of ruins. You are, by all accounts, as practical as a pocket knife. Georgiana felt her spine stiffen. I am not sure whether to thank you or strike you. Thank me. I mean it as the highest compliment. He smiled, and there was no mockery in it. I am not asking you to love me, Miss Blythe. I am asking you to enter into a contract, a marriage of convenience, nothing more. You will have the protection of my name, a comfortable house in London, and a settlement of £5,000, to be paid to you directly upon the signing of the marriage articles for your own use. £5,000. Georgiana kept her face perfectly still, but her heart had begun to race. £5,000 was a sum beyond her wildest imaginings. It would repair the leaky roof of the schoolhouse. It would purchase new slates, new primers, new benches. It would pay a proper salary for a schoolmistress, so that the children of the parish need not rely on Georgiana's increasingly exhausted volunteer hours. It would save St. Margaret's School for the indigent children of the parish. You have done your research, she said carefully. I told you. I made inquiries. Sebastian reached into his coat and withdrew a folded paper, which he placed on the table between them. I know that your father's living is barely sufficient to support him and your younger siblings. I know that the school is funded almost entirely by parish subscriptions, and that the largest donor recently withdrew his support after a disagreement about hymnody.
Mr. Grisham objected to the teaching of the catechism to children whose parents are dissenters, Georgiana said. He felt it was an imposition.
I felt it was an excuse to stop paying his subscription. The point stands. Sebastian tapped the paper. This is a draft of the marriage settlement. It is generous, overly generous, my solicitor tells me, but I find myself in a position where generosity is a necessary expense. You will be my wife in name only. We will live separately if you prefer. I will not impose on you beyond what is required for public appearances. Georgiana looked at the paper. She did not pick it up. And what do you gain from this arrangement beyond my impeccable reputation? £20,000 from my grandmother's trust, which I cannot access until I am married, a wife whose conduct will raise no eyebrows and cause no scandal, a household manager who will not bankrupt me in the first month. He paused. And, if I am being honest, a reason to stop.
Stop what?
Everything. The word came out flat, tired. I have spent the past 8 years racing toward my own destruction, Miss Blythe. I am very good at it. I have lost fortunes at cards, ruined horses, alienated friends, and disappointed my father so thoroughly that he has stopped speaking to me altogether. But I am tired. I am tired of waking up in strange beds. I am tired of owing money to men who would happily break my legs. And I am tired of looking at my sisters' faces and knowing that I am failing them. The fire crackled. A log shifted, sending up a shower of sparks. Georgiana watched him as he spoke, and she saw that he meant it, every exhausted, self-lacerating word. She also saw that he was a gambler, not just in the literal sense, though that too, but in the deeper, more dangerous sense. He was a man who had spent his life making bets, taking risks, trusting to luck. And now he was proposing the biggest gamble of all, that a practical vicar's daughter could save him from himself. You are asking me to trust you, she said slowly, to bind my life to yours on the promise that you will change. I am asking you to enter into a business arrangement. Whether I change or not is irrelevant to the terms of our contract. You will receive your settlement regardless. But the school will not, Georgiana said. If you return to your old habits, if you gamble away what remains of your fortune and end in prison regardless, my reputation is ruined, my position is lost, and the £5,000 will be eaten up by your creditors before I can spend a penny of it. Sebastian's jaw tightened. For a moment, she thought he would argue. Then he surprised her. "You are right," he said. "I have given you every reason to doubt me. I have no collateral to offer beyond my word, which I acknowledge is not worth much in this county. But I will say this. I have never broken a promise to a woman. I have lied to bankers, cheated at cards, and deceived my own father. But I have never made a promise to a woman and broken it. I don't know why that should matter to you, but it is the truth." Georgiana considered this. She considered the leaky roof and the ragged primer, and the children who came to school with no breakfast in their bellies. She considered her father's worn-out coat and her mother's empty chair at the dinner table. She considered the weight of her own exhaustion, the years of doing more with less, of stretching pennies until they screamed. She picked up the settlement. "I will need to read this carefully," she said, "and I will need to speak with my father, and I will need your solemn oath that my sisters-in-law will be removed from their school in Bath and brought to live with us within a fortnight of the wedding." Sebastian's expression flickered, surprise, followed by something that looked dangerously close to hope. "You agree?" "I agree to consider it," Georgiana said firmly. "I am not a gambler, my lord. I do not make decisions lightly or quickly, but I am a woman who knows the value of £5,000, and I am a woman who has seen what happens to young girls raised without protection or affection." She stood, smoothing her skirts. Sebastian rose as well, and for a moment they stood facing each other, the ruined Viscount and the vicar's daughter, two practical people contemplating an impractical bargain. "There is one more thing," Sebastian said quietly. "You should know that marrying me will make you a target. The men to whom I owe money, they are not gentlemen. They will not treat you with the deference due a viscountess. They will see you as leverage." Georgiana met his gaze without flinching. "Then I suppose we shall both have to be careful." She left him standing in the library, the fire dying behind him, a glass of Madeira forgotten on the table. On the long walk back to the vicarage, she calculated the cost of new slates and tried not to think about the tremor in his hands. Chapter 2. The Vows. They were married on a grey Tuesday in the small parish church of St. Margaret's, with only her father, her two younger brothers, and a handful of curious villagers in attendance. Sebastian's family did not come. His father sent a curt letter of acknowledgement. His sisters were still in Bath, unaware that their brother had acquired a wife. Georgiana wore her mother's wedding gown, a simple ivory muslin that had been altered twice and was beginning to show its age. She had no veil, no orange blossoms, no bridesmaids. She did not mind. She had agreed to a contract, not a fairy tale. Sebastian stood at the altar in a coat that had been expensively tailored several years ago and had since seen better days. He looked tired, but composed. When he took her hand, she felt that he was trembling slightly, though his voice was steady as he spoke his vows. "I, Sebastian, take thee, Georgiana, to be my wedded wife." It was done in 10 minutes. They signed the register. Her father embraced her with tears in his eyes, whether of joy or grief, she could not tell. Her brothers shuffled their feet and looked uncomfortable. The villagers dispersed to spread the news. Sebastian handed her into his carriage, a battered vehicle that had once been elegant, and climbed in beside her. "Well," he said, "that was unpleasant. I apologize. It was a wedding, not an execution. I've attended executions that were livelier." He pulled the curtain across the window and leaned his head back against the squabs. "The deed is done. You are now Viscountess Hale, mistress of Rosewick Park, and the proud owner of a husband who is approximately £3,000 in debt, beyond the 20,000 he just inherited." Georgiana blinked. 3,000? You said you needed money to avoid prison. You did not mention that the marriage settlement would be immediately absorbed by existing debts. I did mention it. You simply did not ask the right questions. He opened one eye. "I am a gambler, Miss Blythe, my lady. I have spent years learning to tell the truth without revealing anything useful. You will need to become more adept at interrogation." She stared at him. The carriage jolted over a rut in the road, and she grabbed the leather strap to keep from sliding into him. "You tricked me," she said slowly. "I did not trick you. I told you I was in debt. I told you I needed £20,000 to access my grandmother's trust. I did not specify that the trust would be immediately dispersed to my creditors. That was an omission, not a lie. There is a distinction." "There is no distinction whatsoever." "Ah," he smiled, a thin, weary smile. "Then you are already learning." Georgiana took a breath, then another. The carriage rattled on. Outside, the grey fields of Kent rolled past, sodden with autumn rain. "How much remains?" she asked.
"Of the 20,000, approximately 4. Enough to pay the most urgent debts and keep the bailiffs from the door for another month. After that," he shrugged, "we shall have to economize."
"We." Georgiana savoured the word. "You said you would not impose on me. You said we would live separately." "I lied." He opened both eyes now, and there was something in his gaze, not quite apology, not quite defiance, something raw and honest that she had not expected. "I am sorry for it. I did not intend to. But when I was drafting the marriage settlement, I found that I could not quite bring myself to include the usual clauses for separate maintenance. I told myself it was because separate households would raise questions, but the truth is simpler and less flattering." "Which is?" "I'm afraid of being alone." He said it flatly, without self-pity. "I have spent 8 years surrounded by people who wanted something from me: money, favours, access to my father. I have not spent 1 hour of those 8 years in the company of someone who expected nothing in return. You, Miss Blythe, my lady, you expect nothing from me except what we agreed upon, and that, perversely, makes me want to give you more." Georgiana did not know what to say to this. She was a practical woman, unused to confessions. She had spent her life managing things: budgets, schedules, disputes, ailments. She had never been anyone's confidant. "You have a strange way of showing it," she said finally, "including the part where you failed to mention that I am now married to a man who is still functionally bankrupt." "Yes," Sebastian agreed. "That was poorly done. I am sorry." He sounded sorry. He looked sorry. But Georgiana had been raised by a vicar. She knew that sorry was a word as easily spoken as good morning and considerably less reliable. "When do my sisters arrive?" she asked instead. "I wrote to the school this morning. They should be here by the end of the week." "And the household accounts?" "Are in disarray. The housekeeper has not been paid in 3 months. The cook is stealing from the pantry. The butler is drunk by noon." Georgiana closed her eyes. "You are giving me a great deal of work, my lord." "I am giving you the opportunity to demonstrate your legendary practicality," he said, and then, after a pause, "I am also giving you the keys to the strong box. Whatever money remains is yours to manage. I will not touch it without your permission." She opened her eyes. He was watching her with an expression she could not read, hopeful perhaps, or testing. She thought of the tremor in his hands, the shadows beneath his eyes. She thought of the children at St. Margaret's, who would have new slates and a proper schoolmistress. "Very well," she said, "but we begin now. Before we reach Rosewick Park, you will tell me exactly how much you owe, and to whom. Every debt, every creditor, every promise you have made and broken. I will not be married to a man whose financial affairs are a mystery." Sebastian was silent for a long moment. Then he nodded. "It will take the rest of the journey," he said, "and possibly several bottles of wine. I do not drink during business hours." "Then it will take the rest of the journey and possibly several cups of tea." Georgiana suppressed a smile. "Begin." And he did. He told her about the gambling debts, the hundreds lost at cards, the thousands lost at the track. He told her about the moneylenders and their exorbitant interest rates. He told her about the promises he had made to pay, the extensions he had requested, the lies he had told to buy himself a few more weeks. By the time the carriage turned into the overgrown drive of Rosewick Park, Georgiana had filled 5 pages of her notebook with names and numbers. Her hand ached. Her head ached. But she understood now what she had married. A man who had spent years running from consequences, and who had finally stopped running. £4,000, she said as the carriage drew to a halt. That is what remains. It is not nothing, but it is not enough. I know. We will need to sell something. The horses, perhaps. Sebastian went very still. The horses are worth more than the estate. The horses are also the reason you are in debt. Racing is an expensive hobby, my lord, and you are no longer a man who can afford hobbies. They are not hobbies. They are investments. Investments that have lost you £12,000 in the past 18 months alone, by your own accounting. He said nothing. His jaw was tight, his grey eyes dark with something that looked like pain. Georgiana felt a flicker of sympathy. She understood, dimly, that the horses meant something to him beyond their monetary value. But she could not afford sympathy. She could not afford sentiment. We will discuss it later, she said, and climbed down from the carriage. Rosewick Park was worse than she had expected. The gardens were overgrown, the paint was peeling, and a distinct smell of damp and decay hung over the entrance. The housekeeper who met them at the door was a thin, harried woman with flour on her apron and desperation in her eyes. My lady, she said, bobbing a curtsy. We did not expect you so soon. The master's room is prepared, but yours. I will share my husband's room, Georgiana said, before Sebastian could speak. It is more economical. Sebastian raised an eyebrow but said nothing. Thus began Georgiana's new life. Chapter 3. The Reckoning. The first week was chaos. Georgiana rose at dawn each day and did not stop moving until long after dark. She interviewed the servants, dismissed the drunk butler, renegotiated contracts with the local suppliers, and discovered that the estate had been operating at a loss for 6 years. She wrote letters to Sebastian's creditors, offering partial payments and firm promises. She organised the household accounts into a system so clear and logical that the housekeeper wept with relief. And she met the horses. They were beautiful. There was no denying it. 12 thoroughbreds, each one a masterpiece of bone and muscle and breeding. Sebastian kept them in a stable that was better maintained than the main house, with a staff of grooms who treated the animals like royalty. Georgiana walked through the stables on the 3rd day, a notebook in her hand, and tried to feel nothing. This is Apollo, Sebastian said, stopping before a stall containing a massive black stallion with a white star on its forehead. He won the Derbyshire Cup last year. He is worth £8,000. He is worth whatever someone will pay for him. I will not sell him. You may not have a choice. They had this argument every day. Sebastian was reasonable about everything else: the household economies, the negotiation with creditors, the plan to bring his sisters home. But the horses were a wall he would not breach. On the 4th day the girls arrived. Beatrice and Charlotte Hale were delivered by the Bath coach, accompanied by a sour-faced chaperone who departed the moment she had collected her fee. Georgiana met them in the front hall, her hands dusty from cleaning the library, her hair coming loose from its pins. Beatrice was 14, tall and serious, with her brother's grey eyes and a mouth that seemed permanently disapproving. Charlotte was 12, smaller and rounder, with a scatterbrained energy that reminded Georgiana painfully of her youngest brother. You are not our mother, Beatrice said, after the introductions had been made. No, Georgiana agreed. I am your brother's wife. I am also hungry, and I imagine you are as well.
There is stew in the kitchen and fresh bread from the village. Shall we eat first and list my inadequacies after?"
Charlotte laughed. Beatrice did not, but she followed Georgiana to the kitchen, which was the warmest room in the house. Over stew and bread, Georgiana learned that the girls had been miserable in Bath. Their school was run by a headmistress who believed that young ladies should be seen and not heard, fed and not full, educated and not curious. They had been lonely, homesick, and frightened by the rumours about their brother's debts. "We heard he was going to prison," Charlotte said quietly, her bread forgotten. "Is it true?"
"It was a possibility," Georgiana said. "It is no longer."
"Because he married you."
Beatrice's tone was sharp.
"Because you brought him money?"
"Because he decided to stop running from his problems and face them instead."
Georgiana met the girl's gaze steadily. "I did not bring him money. I brought him a household manager. The money was always his. He simply needed a reason to use it wisely." Beatrice looked sceptical, but she ate her stew. That night, after the girls had been put to bed in the newly aired guest rooms, Georgiana found Sebastian in the library. He was standing before the fire, a glass of brandy in his hand, staring into the flames. "They are angry with me," he said without turning around. "They are children who were sent away from their home and told their brother was a wastrel. Of course they are angry." Charlotte smiled at me. "Charlotte is 12 and hungry for affection. Beatrice will take longer." Sebastian turned. His face was drawn, older than his 30 years. "Thank you," he said, "for being kind to them." "I was not kind. I was honest." Georgiana closed the door behind her and leaned against it. "My lord, we need to talk about the horses." "Not tonight." "Yes, tonight. Your sisters are here. Your creditors have been paid. The estate is, if not solvent, at least no longer bleeding money. But the horses remain, 12 thoroughbreds eating their way through the household budget while you refuse to consider selling them. Explain to me why." Sebastian set down his glass. He walked to the window and stood with his back to her, looking out at the dark garden. "My father gave me Apollo," he said quietly, "when I was 18, before everything went wrong, before I started gambling, before I disappointed him, before he looked at me like I was a stranger. He gave me that horse, and he said, 'This is a fine animal, Sebastian. Treat him well, and he will never let you down.'" Georgiana felt something shift in her chest. "You are keeping the horse because of what he represents." "I am keeping the horse because he is the last thing my father gave me before he decided I was not worth speaking to." Sebastian's voice was rough. "The other horses, the races, the investments, they can go, but not Apollo. I will sell everything else first." She should have argued. She should have pointed out that sentiment was a luxury they could not afford. But she looked at his rigid shoulders, at the way his hands gripped the windowsill, and she thought of her mother's wedding gown. The gown she had worn that morning. The gown she would never wear again because it was too precious to risk. "Very well," she said. "We will sell the others. But you will do it yourself. You will write to the buyers. You will negotiate the prices. You will look them in the eye and tell them why you are selling." Sebastian turned. His expression was unreadable. "You want me to feel the shame of it." "I want you to remember the cost of your choices." Georgiana pushed off from the door and walked toward him. "You asked me to marry you because I am practical, because I do not flinch from hard truths. Here is a hard truth, my lord. You are not a victim of circumstance. You are a man who made choices, and those choices had consequences. The horses are going because you chose to gamble away the money that should have fed them." He flinched. She saw it. A tiny movement, barely perceptible, but there. "You are cruel," he said. "I am honest. There is a difference." For a long moment, they stood facing each other in the firelight. Georgiana could smell the brandy on his breath, the smoke on his clothes. She could see the pulse beating in his throat. "I will write the letters tomorrow," he said.
And he did.
Over the next 2 weeks, Sebastian sold 11 thoroughbreds. He wrote to trainers, to breeders, to rival stables. He negotiated prices that were lower than the horses were worth and higher than he had expected. He watched as the animals were loaded onto carts and driven away, and each time he stood a little straighter. Georgiana watched him, watching them go, and she felt something she had not expected to feel. Respect. It was not love. She was careful not to confuse the two. But respect was dangerous in its own way. Respect was the foundation upon which affection was built. The girls began to thaw. Charlotte followed Georgiana everywhere, asking questions about the household accounts, the garden, the local wildlife. Beatrice remained guarded, but she started joining them for meals without being asked. And once, just once, Georgiana saw her smile at something her brother said. The creditors paid and placated, stopped sending threatening letters. The bailiffs stopped appearing at the door. The house, cleaned and aired and restocked, began to feel less like a mausoleum and more like a home. And then, on a rainy November evening, the past came knocking. Chapter 4. The Devotion. His name was Mr. Jonas Thorne, and he arrived at Rosewick Park without invitation, in a carriage that was too fine for the muddy drive. Georgiana met him in the front hall, the girls safely upstairs with their governess, Sebastian still in the stables with the last of the horses. "Lady Hale," Thorne said, removing his gloves with the casual arrogance of a man who had never been denied entry to any house he wished to enter. "What a pleasure. I had not heard that Hale had married. You must be a remarkable woman, to have convinced him to settle down." "Mr. Thorne." Georgiana did not offer her hand. "I was not aware my husband was expecting visitors." "Your husband owes me money." Thorne smiled, a thin, bloodless smile that did not reach his eyes. "Quite a lot of money, in fact. £8,000 to be precise. I have been patient, Lady Hale, very patient. But patience has its limits." Georgiana felt her heart rate quicken, but she kept her expression neutral. "My husband has paid his debts, all of them. I have seen the receipts myself." "Your husband has paid some of his debts, the ones he chose to acknowledge, the ones he incurred at respectable tables, against respectable opponents." Thorne stepped closer, and Georgiana caught the scent of expensive cologne and something else, something colder, like metal. "But I am not respectable, Lady Hale. And the debts Hale owes me were not incurred at whist or loo. They were incurred at Faro, in a gaming hell that does not exist on any map. They were witnessed by men who would swear on their mothers' graves that Hale signed a promissory note for £8,000. "Let me see the note." "It is not here. It is with my solicitor in London, along with an affidavit from 3 witnesses. If the debt is not paid by the end of the month, I will take it to a magistrate. I will have Hale arrested. I will see him in Marshalsea before Christmas." Thorne smiled again. "And you, Lady Hale, will be free to return to your vicarage, unless, of course, you would prefer to negotiate an alternative arrangement." The implication hung in the air like smoke. Georgiana felt her hands clench at her sides, but she did not step back. "You will leave this house," she said quietly. "You will not return without a written summons, and if you threaten me or my husband again, I will personally ensure that every respectable household in the county knows exactly what sort of man you are." Thorne laughed. It was an ugly sound. "You think your opinion matters to me. I do not move in respectable circles, Lady Hale. I move in profitable ones, and I will have my money, whether from your husband's pocket or from his blood." He left. The front door closed behind him with a sound like a gunshot. Georgiana stood in the hall for a long moment, her heart pounding. Then she went to find her husband. Sebastian was in the stables, brushing Apollo's coat. He looked up when she entered, and something in her expression must have warned him, because he set down the brush immediately. "What happened?" A man named Thorne. He says you owe him £8,000. He says there is a promissory note and witnesses. He says he will have you arrested by Christmas." Sebastian went pale. Not the pale of surprise, the pale of recognition, the pale of a man confronted by a ghost he had hoped was buried.
"Thorne,"
he repeated.
"I thought he had given up. I told him I would pay him when I could. I told him—"
"You told him the truth, and he did not believe you, because you have spent years lying to everyone else." Georgiana's voice was sharp, but not with anger, with fear. "Is the debt real?" "Yes."
"Did you sign a promissory note?"
"I signed something. I was drunk. I don't remember the details, but I remember the amount, £8,000. Sebastian leaned against the stable wall, his eyes closed. "I thought if I could just get married, access the trust, pay off the most pressing debts. I thought Thorne would wait. He has always been patient. He has run out of patience, and now we have £8,000 we do not have, or your sisters lose their brother to prison." Georgiana took a breath. There is only one thing to do. Sebastian opened his eyes. Apollo. Apollo is worth £8,000, perhaps more. If we sell him—
"No. Sebastian."
I said no. He pushed off from the wall, and for a moment he looked like the reckless man she had met in the library, wild-eyed, desperate, clinging to the last shred of his old life. "There has to be another way. I can borrow from my father. I can—" "Your father has not spoken to you in 2 years. He will not lend you money for a debt incurred in an illegal gaming hell." "Then I will sell something else. The land, the house." "The house is entailed. You cannot sell it. The land is mortgaged to the hilt." Georgiana stepped toward him, close enough to see the tears standing in his eyes. "You know what you have to do. You have known from the moment I told you Thorne was here."
Sebastian turned away. He put his hand on Apollo's neck, and the great black horse leaned into the touch, nuzzling his shoulder.
"My father gave him to me," he whispered. "I know. I have lost everything else. My reputation, my fortune, my father's respect. But I have not lost him." "You have not lost anything yet," Georgiana said. "But you will lose your freedom, and your sister's futures, and the life we are trying to build. You will lose all of that if you cannot pay Thorne, and you cannot pay Thorne without selling this horse." Sebastian's hand trembled on Apollo's neck. He stood there for a long time, his head bowed, and Georgiana stood with him. She did not speak. She did not touch him. She simply waited. At last he raised his head. "Write to the breeders," he said. "Find me a buyer." He walked out of the stable without looking back. The auction was held 3 days later. Apollo sold for £9,000, more than he was worth, because the buyers could smell desperation, and Sebastian had learned, in his years of gambling, how to turn desperation into profit. £9,000, 8 to Thorne, 1 to keep. Sebastian paid Thorne in cash in front of witnesses and watched as the man counted every bill with greedy fingers. Thorne smiled and wished him happy. Sebastian did not respond. He came home to Rosewick Park on a cold December evening and found Georgiana in the library, reading to the girls. Charlotte was curled on the sofa, half asleep. Beatrice sat straight-backed in a chair, pretending not to be interested in the story. Georgiana looked up when he entered. Her eyes met his, and she smiled, a small, tired, genuine smile. "You are home," she said.
"I am home."
The girls went to bed. Georgiana poured them both a glass of wine, the last of the Madeira, and they sat by the fire in the library, 2 practical people who had somehow built something more than a contract. "I thought I would feel empty," Sebastian said quietly. "After selling him, I thought I would feel like I had cut off my own arm." "And how do you feel?" Lighter? He turned the glass in his hands. I spent 8 years running from the man my father wanted me to be. I told myself I was running toward freedom, but I was just running in circles. Apollo was the last tether to that old life. And now, he is gone. Not gone, Georgiana said. Sold. There is a difference. He looked at her, really looked at her, not as a convenient solution to his problems, not as a practical housekeeper, but as a woman. A woman who had stood in the front hall and faced down a man like Thorne without flinching. A woman who had cleaned his house, managed his accounts, befriended his sisters, and never once asked for anything in return. Why did you stay? He asked. When I told you about Thorne, when you realized I had hidden another debt, another lie, why did you not walk away? Georgiana considered the question. She thought about the school at St. Margaret's, which now had a new roof and a proper schoolmistress. She thought about her father's worn-out coat, replaced at last. She thought about the children who came to school with breakfast in their bellies because the parish had finally found the funds to feed them. She thought about Beatrice, who had smiled at dinner, about Charlotte, who had fallen asleep on her shoulder, about Sebastian, who had sold his father's horse to save his family. Because you changed, she said simply. Not all at once, not perfectly, but every day a little bit. You sold the horses. You told me the truth about Thorne. You let me see you when you were afraid, and I... She stopped, took a breath. I found that I did not want to leave. Sebastian set down his glass. He reached across the space between them and took her hand. His fingers were warm, steady, no tremor now. I am still a gambler, he said. I will always be a gambler. It is in my blood. But I have learned something this autumn, Georgiana. I have learned that the only bet worth making is the one you place on another person. And which person have you bet on? You. He brought her hand to his lips and kissed her knuckles. I bet on you the day I walked into your father's vicarage and asked you to marry me. I did not know it then. I thought I was making a practical arrangement, a business transaction. But I was making a choice, the only real choice I have ever made. Georgiana felt tears prick her eyes. Tears she had not shed in years, not since her mother's funeral. She blinked them back. We will expand the school, she said. The money from Apollo, the extra 1,000, we will use it to build a new classroom, and you will teach the older boys mathematics. You are good with numbers, despite everything. Sebastian laughed, a real laugh, warm and surprised. I will teach mathematics? You will need something to do. You cannot spend all your time at the track now that you have no horses. I have one horse. Apollo is gone. I kept one. Not Apollo, a different one. A mare. Sebastian's eyes gleamed. She is 3 years old, untrained, and worth almost nothing, but she has good bones and a gentle temperament. I thought Charlotte might like to learn to ride. Georgiana stared at him. Then, despite herself, she smiled. You are impossible, she said. I am reformed, he corrected. There is a difference. He leaned forward and kissed her. It was a gentle kiss, tentative at first. Two strangers learning each other's language. But Georgiana had spent her whole life learning new things, and she was a very fast learner. When they broke apart, the fire had burned low, and the Madeira was finished. Sebastian rested his forehead against hers, and his voice was rough when he spoke. I will not disappoint you, he said. I will not gamble. I will not lie. I will not hide from you again. I will spend the rest of my life making sure you do not regret marrying me. I already do not regret it, Georgiana said. I have not regretted it for weeks, perhaps months. I stopped counting. That is the most romantic thing you have ever said to me. I am a practical woman. Practical women do not say romantic things. You just did. She kissed him again, just to prove him wrong. Epilogue. 1 year later, on a bright September morning, the new wing of St. Margaret's School opened its doors. It was a small building, only 2 rooms, but it was clean and warm and filled with light. The children who crowded through the doors carried new slates and new primers, and their faces were bright with the particular joy of children who have been given something they never expected to receive. Sebastian Hale, Viscount Hale, stood at the front of the largest classroom and attempted to teach 12 farm boys the principles of long division. He was, by all accounts, a terrible teacher, impatient, easily distracted, prone to making bets with the students about who could solve a problem fastest. But the boys loved him, and somehow, despite everything, they were learning. Georgiana watched from the doorway. She was not teaching today. Her condition, now visibly advanced, had confined her to administrative duties, but she had come to see the opening. She had earned that much. "You are staring at me," Sebastian said without looking up from the chalkboard. "I am supervising. You are staring. It is distracting. The boys are noticing." The boys were, in fact, giggling. Georgiana ignored them. "There is a letter from your father," she said. "He wishes to visit at Christmas. He asks if he may bring his new wife." Sebastian set down the chalk. His expression was carefully neutral, but she saw the hope beneath it. The same hope she had seen in the library nearly a year ago, when he had first asked her to consider his proposal. "My father has not set foot in this house in 3 years," he said. "He wishes to meet his grandchild." "He does not know if it is a boy or a girl." "He does not care." Georgiana walked into the classroom and stood beside him, close enough that her shoulder brushed his arm. "He has written to me every month since the wedding. He asks about you. He asks about the girls. He asks about the school. He is trying, Sebastian. He is not good at it, but he is trying." Sebastian looked at the letter in her hand. Then he looked at the boys, who had abandoned all pretense of working and were watching the drama unfold with rapt attention. "Tell him he may come," he said quietly. Tell him I would like that." Georgiana smiled. She folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket, and she did not tell him that his father had already purchased a rocking horse for the nursery. Some surprises, she decided, were worth saving. The morning bell rang. The boys scattered to their next lessons. Sebastian caught Georgiana's hand and held it for a moment, his thumb tracing circles on her palm. "You saved me," he said. "I did not save you. I simply refused to let you drown." "That is the same thing." "No." She squeezed his fingers. "Saving implies that you were helpless. You were never helpless. You were lost. There is a difference." Sebastian looked at her, his practical wife, his unexpected partner, the woman who had seen him at his worst and stayed anyway. He thought about the debts he had paid, the horses he had sold, the promises he had kept. He thought about the school, built with money he had earned through sacrifice and honesty. He thought about his sisters, laughing in the garden, about the child growing in his wife's belly, about his father coming home for Christmas. He thought about the man he had been and the man he had become, and the distance between them. "I love you," he said. It was the first time he had said it, the first time either of them had said it, though the words had been waiting in the air between them for months. "I love you, Georgiana. I did not marry you for love. I did not even like you at first. But I love you now, more than I have ever loved anything." Georgiana's eyes filled with tears, those stubborn tears she had been holding back for a year. She did not wipe them away. "I love you too," she said, "though I wish you had told me about Thorn before the wedding." He laughed, pulling her close. "That is the most practical declaration of love I have ever heard." "I told you, I am a practical woman." She leaned her head against his shoulder, And they stood together in the bright schoolroom, surrounded by the noise and chaos of children learning, and neither of them felt the need to say anything more. Some arrangements they had discovered became something more. Some bargains turned into blessings. And two practical people, who had never expected to find happiness, had found it anyway, not in grand gestures or passionate declarations, but in the quiet, stubborn work of building a life together, day by day, choice by choice. The end. Thank you, dear reader of the Regency Gazette, for joining us in another tale of love, intrigue, and whispered ballroom secrets. If today's romance delighted you, kindly bestow a like upon this video. It helps our Gazette reach more lovers of Regency storytelling. For weekly journeys into dukes, debutantes, scandals, and slow-burning devotion, please subscribe to the Gazette and tap the little bell so you are notified the moment the next story is published. Until our next edition, may your days be filled with grace and your nights with the promise of romance.